Good afternoon, folks. My name is Kerry. You guys are watching Prophecy Montana podcast. And, you know, I've got some good news for you. Amidst all of the chaos and everything, I got this little video I want to show you right now. We're going to put that on. Pull this up here real quick. This is a really cool video that this guy sent from Altadena.
So here we are on Fair Oaks and Las Flores Drive. This is the corner house on the left side of my house. This is across the street, the corner house, and the two houses in front, and the entire street on my side, on my right side, is decimated. From what I could see, every house is burnt down on my block, except for my house. Why do I deserve this? I don't know. I don't think I deserve it, but God bless everybody else.
Arrived.
With plenty of insurance to rebuild. God knew what he had to do to protect me, because I'm an idiot. I might not have had insurance. I don't know. I gotta check if I paid it. Meanwhile, everybody else's house around me is, oh my God. Everybody behind me. How is this? How could this even be true? Everybody behind me is burned down. My lumber, even all of my lumber burned.
Look at that. Look at that.
Even the lumber that we were building the extension
Right up next to his deck.
house,
Right up next to his deck.
but my house is intact. But even my lumber burned down. How does that happen if not God?
Incredible.
The neighbors are gone.
Now wait till you see what's next.
The garage is even still standing.
Yeah, wait. He's going to go check
I
it out
don't
right now.
understand how this happens.
It's unbelievable.
This is God. Not because I feel I deserve it either, I just don't know. But God protected me. My neighbor's house is gone 100%. Even the old garage door burned a little bit but the garage didn't burn. Oh, I do have a little bit of fire damage in here, yes.
Right up there at the top there.
So
Right there at
looks
the
like
peak.
the garage burned from the flames on this side of the house, and they're still kind of burning. All right, we're gonna go ahead and put some water on that right now. Make sure
What?
we put-
How did that not burn down other than God protected him? How?
Besides that, the entire house is still here. Thank you, God.
It's unbelievable. You know, I was just thumbing through some of the videos. You know, I've been trying to, get some of the latest on what's going on over there, and I've been running across videos like these, and they're very encouraging because amidst all of the destruction, what does the Bible say? Though 1,000 fall on my left and 10,000 on my right, none shall come nigh to thee. Only with thine eyes shall I behold the destruction of the wicked. And I'm not saying everybody that lost their house is wicked. That is extremely presumptuous to say something like that. You know, it was a terrible tragedy, and a lot of people have lost their homes. And as a people, we need to be praying for these people. You know, as children of the Lord, we need to dedicate our lives and our prayer to I mean, if we're anywhere near, or if we can help these folks, we should. Now, there's some criticism out there that say, well, the rich folks, what do they need our help for? Well, it's kind of like Peter said, silver and gold I have not, but what I do have I give unto you freely. So, this is a great time to reach people, to meet them at their core, And so many of these people are destitute spiritually. And I think it would be perfect timing to approach these folks and maybe try to hand them a tract or try to talk to them or try to comfort them, because many people are asking why. Why would God allow my house to burn down? Why would God allow all of our memories to just disappear and stuff like that? And I don't have the answers for that. And we were talking, my wife and I, and she was talking about her mother and why her mother's in an old folks home and why she's, and a lot of times she's not happy. She's paralyzed partially and she's going through some really tough times. She's been awarded to the state. A lot of stuff went on, and for whatever reason, I mean, but she was such a good woman in her life, and we ask why do these things happen, and the best answer I could come up with is that God allows these things to get our attention, because this world is just a passing thing, and of course, God considers our comfort on this world, but he considers something greater than that, and that's our salvation. And when we lose everything that we have, everything that we hold precious and dear here on this earth, we only have one thing left, and that's God. Now, it was prudent for many people to have fire insurance, and of course there's stories about how the insurance companies have been dropping people left and right, and so many of these people that have had their homes burned down are actually left without insurance, which in itself is a tragedy, because I remember when the fire came over our hill over here, and I didn't have fire insurance at the time, and when I was watching that fire, and it's a little different when you're in the middle of it. When that smoke came over and those embers started to hit you, I mean, it is absolutely terrifying. And I remember that I couldn't breathe. I remember that much. I ran and got my respirator, and I put my respirator on, and that helped. I was able to at least breathe, but it gets into your eyes and you can't see, and those embers and that smoke and everything gets dark, and it's just very ominous, and especially when those winds are high like that, which they were high that day. But God spared our house too. And many people up here had lost their home. So I kind of relate to what's going on down there, not to quite the extent, not the devastation, but we did visit some people up here that had lost everything. They didn't have nothing. Their houses burned all the way to the ground. And it was very surreal listening to them talk about, and just watching their reactions. And I remember we had a little bit of money on us. I don't remember how much it was, but we just pretty much just gave it all to one of the people. And it might have been $500-600 or something. And I just, was impressed. Here, just take it. And I was so grateful that my house didn't burn down. And, many people nowadays are, and I hear this a lot on social media, and while parts of this may be true, it's a very cruel way to think, because many of us are saying, well, they had it coming, they deserved it, this was God's wrath. And that's a huge mistake, I think, that Christians make. Instead of, our hearts, like this man here of the video I just showed you, his heart was really going out to his neighbors. And I've watched several others like it, where they came home and their house was the only one standing and everybody else was gone. And it's almost like survivor's guilt, where they're just sitting there and they're just so grateful to have, their homes still left intact, but then their heart just goes out for all of their neighbors around them. And it's a very difficult situation. It's very, very tough. And so we have to have a spirit of humility, a spirit of, listen, if God is going to pass judgment on these people, he can just as easily do that with us. And in fact, we're told that we should not rejoice in the day when the wicked fall. And again, I'm not calling anybody wicked down there, okay? That's not my call. That's not my say. But we know that when many wicked things happen in these big cities, and they generally are a hotbed for vice and wickedness. That's why we're instructed to move out into the country. and that's why we're instructed to grow gardens. Now, these things, they connect us back with our roots, our land, the everyday toil, and they give us a realistic view of the world around us, and they tend to this type of lifestyle tends to make us more empathetic. There's a lot of criticism to the country living message, and maybe we'll talk about that a little while, because whenever I bring this up, of course, there's people out there that haven't moved out in the country yet, and they're very critical of people who preach these messages, because it's so insurmountable for them to get out of the cities, It's such a monumental task. So it feels, and this is where our faith has to come in. Now, is God calling everybody out of the cities? I don't know, but if God is calling you, you will hear His voice. You will feel that urgency, and you should respond. If we block those voices out for too long, then pretty soon we can't respond, because God's voice will be quieted, and it will be replaced with other voices that will tell us other things that will sound like God's voice, but it won't be God's voice. And this is a very dangerous place to be. We don't want to be there. So what does God's voice sound like? Well, it sounds like it's going to align with the Bible and the spirit of prophecy. That's what it's going to align with. And we've been given instruction, actually, in the spirit of prophecy, to move out of the cities. Oh, Miss White has said this over and over and over again. Now, of course, there's plenty of proof in the Bible of the benefits of country living as well. Many of the prophets didn't live in the cities. Probably most, if not all of them, didn't live in the cities. They had their place in the country. Of course, they worked in the cities. They would go out there to save people, to evangelize or whatever, to give messages to the righteous and the wicked. And they often needed to go back and to recharge their batteries. So to have that place, that refuge, is really important. And so when we talk about country living, we're talking about something that can help us to be able to form the right frame of mind to put us in that right place. And a little bit about my story, because there's so many people out there, so many of my brothers and sisters out there that are lost in this thinking that I could never move out into the country. I could never do it. And many times people look at me like I've got some special skills or some special, form of faith or something that has gotten me to where I am at now. And really where I'm at now, I feel kind of unworthy to even have it. I feel unworthy to even be able to claim any work in it at all, after looking back and looking at all of the miracles that God has wrought, because the way this happened, I mean, it's incredible. I mean, you guys have heard part of the story before, but Lisa and I, we were super poor, and we never had 2 dimes to rub together, let alone, I mean, we could barely make rent. We could barely make our bills. But when Paul Whitlock, the late Paul Whitlock, came along, and he was preaching to us, and he was telling us that we need to move in the country. We need to move in the country. And it was a little bit chagrining, actually. I mean, to hear him say that and to be so persistent about it. And he really felt like that was his calling to direct us in that direction, to really push us in that direction. And we didn't have anything. And he just kept saying, you just have to have faith. You have to have faith. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean to have faith? I mean, it's easy for you to say, right? But Paul, he persisted up until the day he died. I kid you not, like probably 2 days after he died, we met a fellow by the name of John Record, which is he's still very much alive. He lives out there in Maine, and spoke to him, 6 months ago or so, and he came along and he picked up where Paul left off, and I thought, well, God is maybe trying to tell me something. This is the second individual that come into our lives, and he's telling us the importance of moving out into the country. And they had plenty of quotes in Spirit of Prophecy and stuff. I was very resistant to it. So I recognize immediately, when I tell people about the country living message, and their resistance immediately comes up. I see myself in that resistance. I see myself in that hesitation to grasp a hold of this concept of, gee, I got to move out into the country. How in the world is that going to happen? How am I going to own my own land? How am I going to grow my own gardens on my own land? And so, long story short, we felt like it was God's calling, but we were invited to live out on the ranch, kind of like at John's promptings, John Record's promptings. And so we would move out. We moved out onto this ranch there in King City, California. And we lived there for a couple of years, and we built a little house, and we had a great big garden, and things were going really well. But after a couple of years, that all fell apart. And they were all Adventists on the ranch, but there was some friction, there was some just things that just build up over time. And they asked us to leave. I mean, essentially they kicked us off the ranch. I was very bitter about that. I was very upset. But again, God's hand was leading. And we were really in a mess. We were really in a bad shape. But we were stepping out of our comfort zone to go move on this ranch in essentially what was a tent to build this house that they wanted us to build and this garden. And we showed up with all the skill, and they had all of the assets, if you will, the land, the property and whatnot. And we scavenged wood from an old house, and on the ranch there, we farmed hay, and so there was, and then they would harvest the barley on the hills, and there was all this straw that was left over. So I hatched this plan to build a straw bale house, and so we went up there and we baled these straw bales and put them on the trailer and hauled them off the hill, brought them down, and we made kind of a makeshift foundation with what we had, and just started stacking these bales. And we built a straw bale house. We built about maybe a 1/4 acre garden, and had a bunch of trees on there. And we got several water supplies hooked up for the place. We had a rainwater catch system that was, we built this 20,000 gallon ferro cement tank, a lot of work. And then after all that, we were asked to leave. And of course I was very bitter. And I didn't know what God was doing. I didn't know where he was leading us. I was very confused. I felt like I had put a little bit of faith in, and I was expecting something in return. That's what that's what anybody would expect, especially when the promises of God, and you're sitting there looking at the promises of God and everything's so bleak. But directly after that, Lisa had gotten a job taking care of an old man. And it wasn't very long after she started taking care of this old man that the fellow that used to live there was kind of an adopted son. And he calls Lisa up, and he had to move out, and she was moving in, and and we thought, well, this is where we're going to be staying, is at this old man's house. And but the son-in-law, he calls up and he asked Lisa, hey, can I come over and dig up some things in the riverbed? I buried some stuff in the riverbed, and she said sure. We thought at the time, oh shoot, he's going to come dig up his marijuana plants or whatever, right? I mean, that's what I thought. And I mean, I don't care, whatever. I mean, do what you want. It's your place, or it used to be, or whatever. And so, but they didn't come in the riverbed. They started digging in the front yard, and they were digging all day long, and they were talking and stuff. And I was listening to them, and they were saying, oh, it was by this tree. It was by the corner of the house. And you line up those three. And I'm thinking in my head, these guys are digging in the wrong spot. I kept saying, well, listen, if the corner of the house and where the tree used to be, and and I said, it lines up right here, I think. And, no, that's not it. No, that's definitely not. And by the end of the day, we were talking and stuff. And he said, look, I may as well tell you what it is. He says, I buried some gold coins. He said, if you find them, he says, and if you give me a call, I'll give you half of them. And at that time, oh, okay, well, all right, whatever. He says, he shook on it. He says, I know you're a Christian man. You'll keep your word. And so the very next day, I went over there and I marked a spot with the post hole diggers and made a little hole about that deep. And I thought, I'll come back and dig later. I don't feel like it. Well, my son got up the very next day. I had to go to work, and he dug it up in 5 minutes. And they called me up, and then I called him up, and he came and he divvied out half the gold coins. There was a lot of gold coins in there. There was 20 to be exact, 21-ounce double eagle gold coins that were dated back to the 1800s. So we got 10 of those, and he got 10, and there was a bunch of silver in there too. But what I didn't know is my wife had been praying for money. That's a strange thing to pray for, but by golly, God answered that prayer in dramatic fashion. So we had this money, and previously I had been looking online, and I had found this place in Montana, the place that we're living on now, and I'd been looking at it on and off for about a year. It was on this little site called Land Central, and so I was pretty excited about it. Well, no, I wasn't excited about it. Let me change my statement there. I was not at all excited about it, but I was excited to go to Montana for whatever reason. And this lady, she came up to us, she approached us, and she said, "How about if we go to Montana?" And she had money, and she says, "We'll build cabins." And I thought, okay, this is my big break. We're going to move to Montana. We're going to build cabins for this lady, and she's going to grant us a piece of land. This is how we're going to get out of the cities, right? I kept waiting for other people to fulfill my this thing that God was going to do for me. I kept looking at people, and here's where my problem lied. And it took a while for God to kind of straighten me out on this thinking. But we went up to Montana. We drove all over the state. I fell in love with it. And as soon as we got, but the whole idea of building cabins kind of faded once we got up there. And I think she lives up in Montana now. I think she officially has moved up here. Last I heard. I don't know where she lives, but we parted our ways, and I told Lisa, as soon as we get back home, we're gonna get in the truck and we're going to Montana. I don't care what it takes. I've seen it. I know where we're living now, and I just had this passion, this fire burning inside me that couldn't be put out at that point. And so we got home. We loaded everything we could my wife had a RAV. It was the nicest vehicle we've owned in years, and I had this old van. And this trailer, and then my son had a Subaru. We looked like gypsies driving down the road. I mean, it was just a ragged muffin bunch of, people. And so I had my three sons and my wife and the van and the RAV, and we just take off. Boom. We just head out of there. We loaded everything we could that we owned in those vehicles and that trailer, and we just left. And we just drove and drove and drove until we got to Montana. And we looked all over the state. Now, I think we had probably, between the gold coins, the silver, and some other money that I had raised, I think we had $20-some thousand in the bank. And $20-some thousand wasn't going to buy us anything. We were looking at property after property, and the discouragement was rising. It was rising quick. And we just kept driving, hitting motels, and one property after another, one place after another. It's just started to get very, very monotonous, and it was wearing us down. But at the very last, and this was kind of like a last straw, I looked back on this property that was for sale on Land Central. Like I said, I wasn't excited about this piece of land at all. And so we thought, well, we'll just check this place out. And we headed out to where we're at now, but instead of driving, there's two driveways that go through our property, one at the top and one at the bottom. And we drove through the top one, and the wind was blowing, and it was a hot day, I remember. And the van, the transmission, I drove up and I stopped, and there was just smoke pouring out from my hood. Because I got to the top of the hill, and I thought to myself, we're not living here. There's just no way we're going to live here. I was already thinking that in my head, because I got out of the van, and the dust is hitting me in the eyes, and it was just so dry and so dusty and so nasty. And I'm thinking there's no place to build, because the top of the hill came up like this, and you look down the other side, and it's this sheer cliff. And I thought the property was out towards that way. And I just instantly just sank, and I thought, oh man, this is terrible. But we get to the top of the hill, and the van it breaks down. It just quits. It won't drive. I kept put it in drive. I put it in reverse, because I was just going to back right out of there and just drive right on. But this thing just quits, and it just dumps a whole bunch of transmission fluid on the ground and smoke everywhere. And I thought, oh man, my van is done. Oh great, this is the end of the world. Here we are out in the middle of nowhere. My van broke down, and I am completely destitute. I'm done. And I remember taking my phone, and Lisa's like, well, she's trying to make a good day out of it, and bless her heart. I mean, she's always rises up when things get at their toughest point. And she goes, well, I'll make some sandwiches, and you know, we'll take a break. We need a break anyways. And so she runs off into the trailer, and she starts, you know, whipping up something to eat. She can whip up something to eat really fast. And I'm just, oh, I'm so whipped. And I walk over by this fence, and I just sit down on the ground, and I'm looking at my phone, and I just pull up the maps. And for some reason, and it's never happened before, but you know, when you pull up the regular maps, it doesn't show you the property lines, but it did this time. And it showed me all of the property lines and where I was at in relationship to it. And I recognized, because I had looked at that map so many times and the way the property was laid out on the land central, that I recognized immediately the layout of that property. It looked very familiar, and I thought, oh, geez, this property's right here. I'm at the top corner. I'm not at the bottom corner. And all of a sudden, I just had this great epiphany. And then I see this little dot where I'm at. It's showing me where I'm at on the map. And I hollered to Lisa. I said, Lisa, we got to run down this hill real quick. I think the property's actually down there. And we ran down the hill, and we ran back up. We ate our sandwiches, and I got so excited because it was such a great piece of land. After I just actually started walking it, I knew right then and there, this is where we're going to be. This is the piece, the same piece of land that God had showed me a whole year prior. And so I think it was on Land Central, you know, they finance all their own things. So I bought this thing, and it only cost me $300 down to secure the property. $300, can you imagine that? Just $300 lousy dollars. I mean, God gave us $24,000 to get up here, but it only took us $300 to actually buy the piece of property. He showed us the property a year ago, but my stubborn head kept waiting and kept relying on other people, kept waiting for other people to rescue us. You know, God's going to help us through this person, and God's going to help us through that person. And God can do those things, but that's not how God was working with us. He wanted me to trust him. And as soon as I bought the property, I'm not kidding you, and as soon as we ate a sandwich, and I was happy, and I was thinking, man, I was in such like disbelief that this was such a great piece of land, and now just by a swipe of a finger and just by the quick, I hit the buy button and it took it out of my bank, and boom, just like that, we secured this property. Of course, I owed money on it still, but they were manageable payments. I know I could make those payments. And I was just so elated. And, you know, I told Lisa, I says, well, I guess this is our property, but I got back in the truck. I thought, well, maybe we can leave the truck here, but I got back in the truck and I started that thing up, and it went right into drive, and it just drove right off like nothing had ever happened. Left a big puddle of tranny fluid behind. That thing wasn't even low on transmission fluid. To this day, it just amazes me how God works. And when God finally gets us to where we need to be, 9 times out of 10, we're just completely befuddled. We're so hung up on our plan and what we want and how we want things to turn out that we so often just overlook the very thing that's right in front of us, that's right in front of our face, that's so obvious. And I've learned so much by those experiences. And then, we started living on this piece. It was a raw piece of land. It had no water, no power, no sewer, no nothing, no structure. Had this little trailer, few little tents. I got to tell you the rest of it because it's amazing. I mean, we bought some lumber. We built this little, what my wife affectionately called the box. That was our very first. Excuse me. It does that to me every time I get on here. That first little structure that we built, that little box. And we put a little fireplace in it, and that I thought was going to be my shop. And there's the kids out there with the tent, and we had a few relatives, but we didn't know them. But one of them calls us up and says, "Hey, why don't you guys come stay in my trailer for the winter?" Because winter was setting in. So we stayed over there wound up being there for 2 winters while we built the home, and everything just clicked. And that $24,000, we didn't really need it, come to find out. That was an incentive that God gave us to get us up here. That was what it took. We didn't spend that much money of that $24,000 on building the actual house. It was very, very little money. I think $500-600 of it actually went into the materials of the home. And we literally spent all the rest living on that money until I found a job. And I'll tell you, I was down to absolute just nothing in my bank account. My phone was being shut off. And we just happened to cross, I had some ads on Craigslist, and this guy calls me up, and at the last minute we get this job, and at the last minute we get paid by the job, and at the last minute I get my phone bill. I mean, everything's just down to the wire, but the whole time God's telling me, trust me, trust me, trust me. I got you. And he, so often God has to empty us from everything to get us to trust him, because we're so darn stubborn. We're so darn stubborn. And I look back and I look at how often I could have sabotaged the plan. How many times did he have a plan already laid out for me in the past that I sabotaged it? Now I'm really starting to think, because when you're looking in the past, you're thinking, geez, maybe God was trying to do something here, and here. And I'm just so stinking stubborn, I can't seem to get off a dead center. And so to me, it's a miracle within a miracle within a miracle. And God has really revealed himself through this whole process to me. So the country living message, what it did for me is it built my faith. It's built my endurance with God. It's really showed me how God works, and that's helped me a lot in really moving forward to see his actual unfolding of his plans. Now, I probably, and I've seen him open up things to me since I've been here, and I've recognized them now. And it's so important for us to live in a position where we're constantly putting God at the helm, where we're having to trust him for our next meal. A lot of missionaries do this, and they learn through the same process. You hear these same amazing stories. My Aunt Gladys, she was a missionary in Ethiopia her whole life, and she would have the wildest stories that she would tell us of relying on God and what it was like, and not having food, and then a food would show up, and just these stories that she would tell. They were just always so amazing, and I always wanted those experiences and never got them because I never really put myself in a position to trust God. Now, we're told in the last days that, there's a real problem with God's church, and the church that is in Laodicea. The condition of Laodicea, she's sleeping, she's asleep. She needs to wake up. She's blind, right? And she's rich, and she's abundant in things, and she doesn't need God. And it says for us to buy the gold tried in the fires. That gold is our faith, and that gold is really what activates God's power in our life. Without the faith, we have nothing. Really, we have nothing. We can live a life, and we can put our full trust in mankind all around us. There's devices that are given to us, and I'm not saying they're bad devices. Like insurance companies. It's good to have your home insured. God would want us to insure our home. But there's a trust that goes beyond that. And like that video I just showed you, this man's insurance had lapsed, and he was sure that his house was burned down, and he came back and his house was there, and he praises God for it. And he doesn't feel like he's worthy of it. And we really aren't worthy of it. This is the condition that we're in. God saved this man's house because this man's reaction was humility, one of humility. It was one of praise God. And he didn't feel deserving of it, and we aren't deserving of it. We don't deserve his goodness. Really, we don't. So if bad things happen to us, it's not because God has orchestrated some plan to devise against us. 9 times out of 10, these bad things happen. Like getting kicked off that ranch, that was a real blow to me. I had worked so hard and I'd done so much. And that kind of betrayal really ate at my soul, especially people that were of the same faith. We're brothers and sisters, and we worshiped together, and we sang songs together, and we prayed together. And to have that betrayal was a real deep cut. And I thought, why? This whole thing was so perfect. This whole setup was so perfect. Why would God let it all fall apart like this? And, and instead of looking at, he's closing this door. What do we have on the other side of this door that he's opening for us? Instead of thinking like that, the human mind just instantly wants to go to people for help. And I've done this my whole life, and I watch other people doing it, always looking to that person to help. When you see someone come into the church destitute, and they're feeling very sorrowful because of a loss or because of their situation that they're in. You know, you'll see these people come in once in a while, and you can see clearly on their face that they're in distress, and usually there'll be an elder or somebody that'll come up, and these people want to speak to the pastor, and they want to speak to somebody that can help them, right? They're looking to a person. That's not a bad place to start, okay? But they're looking to people, because this just is an example of how the human mind works. We all work the same way. This mechanism all works the same way amongst us. And it's our minds, they always go to people instead of to God. Now, God can use people to help us. And I'm not saying, that's often 9 times out of 10 how he does deliver us is through, the hands of some other person. But to look to a person is not the correct way to do it. As a mature Christian, I'm saying. As an immature Christian, that's what we do. We go straight to the person. We say, oh, I need help. I need money. I need this. I need that. I need a house. I need a car. I need all these things. I don't even have a job. Whatever your problem is. We're looking for people to solve those problems instead of getting on our knees and crying out to God and say, God, please help me. I was out of work just 2 weeks ago. And we can, but I know better. I know where to find my help now. And I got on my knees and I prayed to God and I asked him, I said, God, I need work. Well, I need work, but we're required to ask because it unlocks his hands in the situation. By asking, we'll receive. By believing, we'll receive. By believing that he can deliver. And I didn't only just pray, but I really actively went out there and started searching for it too. You can't just pray and just sit there. That's another component of God and how he works, is that he requires us to really do all that we can in our own power, which is a feeble attempt at best most of the time. Let's be real about this, okay? Most of the time, it's just a very feeble, lame attempt to see ourselves get across to the other side. But the help that engages God's hand in the saving process, if you will. And so that is really how we activate God's power, is by going forth and doing that thing which I just asked God to help you to do. And he can't say no to that. And I didn't mention it this time, but we had previously, when we got that money, we had actually bought a place in Oregon that really looked perfect. But when we went up there and we looked at it, God, it was very apparent that God was not behind that piece of land, but he did honor the faith. And that's when we went up to, if you step out in faith, it may not even be the right path that you're supposed to be on to begin with. Walk the path that you believe God wants you to be on, for sure. Don't just go, maverick or wild off some crazy, weird path. Actually walk the path that you believe 100% that God wants you on, and pray to him to reveal his will to you. And through that process of you trying, at least attempting in this lame attempt to follow his will, he will reveal his will to you in that process. That's how that works. That's the only way it can work. So many times I see people, you got to get out there and you got to work those people. You got to get out there and really get active and get busy. And this is how the gospel works. This is how God's grace, how his faith is, how our faith is activated, how his power is activated through our faith. So yeah, man, just really, really a lot of stuff going on right now. And I'm just compelled to tell anybody that's out there listening, whether listening now live or whether you'll be listening to this later after the live, that it is very important, I believe, to start making that transition to country living somehow, some way. Now, not all are called, but those who are called, you will hear the voice. You will hear the voice. And when that voice comes to you, don't quiet it, because if we quiet those voices, then other voices will replace it, and those won't be necessarily the voice of God. God's voice will get quieter, the other voices will get louder. And because we're in a war, Satan is warring for our minds. He's warring for our soul. and he's trying to take our salvation from us. We're just willingly giving it away anyways, right? It's not like he has to even try that hard, because we're not fighting the good fight against self, against the number one enemy out there, and that's me. I'm the number one enemy for me. And I'm other people's enemy too, believe it or not. I mean, we can be a lot of people's enemy if we're not close to God. If he's not transforming us, then we're going to be transformed anyways, but not in his image. We're going to be transformed in the image of the world. We're going to be transformed in the image of, well, Satan, he goes to church too, I've heard it said, and he will teach us how to become a Christian. He will teach us the way, if you will. But it's not the right way. It's a polluted form of Christianity. In fact, the Bible calls it Babylon. The other door to God, is that how you translate that? It's another door to God. It's not the door to God. It's not the door that God has provided for us. No, we don't like that door. That door is not attractive looking at all. We want this door over here. How did God deliver me? I don't know. It seems like there's so many miracles for this hard-headed guy. I mean, I look at my life and I just wonder why. Just like the man on the video I showed you, he's asking why. Why did my house get saved? And I'm asking God, why is my family intact? Why are my boys still alive? Why? I mean, there's so many things that he has blessed me with that I don't deserve. I literally do not deserve them. Why has God preserved me? Why has he brought me out to where I'm at now? Why has he given me all these things, all this, the ability to come online and to talk? And I mean, why has he done all these things? I shouldn't be doing this stuff. I don't feel worthy. I don't feel, I don't feel like, like I'm good enough to do these things. But God, he promises that he'll equip us. And so therein lies the faith again, okay, so I'm a dirty, rotten scoundrel. God has called me to do this. Well, I shouldn't be doing this because I'm a dirty, rotten scoundrel. But by faith, I'm going to accept that he's going to equip me to do these things, right? I'm just going to, by faith, accept that he can raise me to the level that I need to be at to be able to accomplish his goals. It's an amazing thing, guys. It's an amazing thing. The weather here in Montana has been cold. We're going to be getting snow this Friday. It's going to be, the weather's going to start getting worse. And I have found one of the biggest reasons why we didn't move up here sooner was because of the weather, because I was so scared of the cold, because I was so scared of I mean, Lisa and I both were raised in the Sierra Nevada mountains, and we lived at 8,000 foot elevation. It was in California, but I mean, we got snow and it got cold up there. Not like it does here. You think that would have prepared us? You think that would have prepared our minds to really overlook the weather part of it? But it was kind of a scary thing. We put all these barriers up in our mind. Well, I don't want to move over here because of this or this. I don't want to move over here because of these reasons here. And really what we need to do is just let God lead. And he will guide our paths. What does it say? Blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord, for he'll be like a tree planted by the waters. And when drought comes, he won't see it. And cursed is he that trusteth in the arm of flesh, and make arm of flesh his fortress. This man will not prosper, because the arm of flesh is always going to let us down. These people that we keep relying on, that are going to see us through, these promises that individuals make, and they can't help it. And we were wrong for putting our faith in them in the first place. Man can only do so much. We should only expect so much out of man. That's where a lot of our disappointments come from, because we put too much faith in people. And then we're always disappointed and we're always let down. And that letdown always makes it a little harder to trust the next time around. And so we just grow up being these calloused, inward, I almost said introspective, but introspective is really what we want to be. But these inverts, these introverts, that just kind of keep to ourselves, and we just build this wall around us, and we don't want nobody to get inside because we've been hurt so many times. We've been hurt so many times because we put all our faith in mankind, and that's a curse. That is a curse. When we trust man, we are cursed. When we trust God, we are blessed. It's a simple equation. It says over and over in the Bible that God is faithful, and he cannot lie. Man has limitations. We cannot put too much trust in him. And I can't say that enough because, look, we all do it. And we put faith in our jobs. We put faith in the power grid. We put faith in the food chain. We put faith in, insert whatever you'd like that's man-made. We put our faith in there. These people put their faith in their insurance companies, in their homes, in the fact that their homes might have had the latest, greatest fireproofing stucco and metal roofing or whatever that was available at the time that protected their home from the fire. But, if, like Noah's Ark, for example, here's a good example, because we're told in the Spirit of Prophecy that Noah's Ark was a mighty ship. He did a great job. He did what he could humanly to build that ship, but it was not good enough. That ship would have broken apart had not the mighty hands of angels held that boat up from surely sinking and surely being destroyed from the great tempest that raged about. In fact, it said that the tempest was so great that the demons and the evil angels themselves thought that they would be destroyed by it. That's a pretty frightening picture of the destruction that God had wrought many years ago during the Great Flood. And this same destruction, not with water this time, but with fire, because we promised that water would never encompass the whole earth again. Of course, we've had many floods, but never has it encompassed the whole world. But we're going to see God's judgment. We're going to see his fury. And in all honesty, all this really is not God's anger as much as it is our rejection of the protection that God has offered us. And when we live an evil life and we make evil choices and we continually reject him over and over again, then what other choice does God have but to leave us to our own devices, which is certain destruction at best? And he's held back the winds for the righteous sake. Look at Lot and his family. Sodom and Gomorrah was going to be destroyed. The angels came and got him out of there. And were it not for 10, then righteous, then God would have saved the city. He told Abraham that because Abraham pleaded with God. And we should be pleading with God to save the souls of those who are lost. If there's but 10, Lord, if there's but 10, if there's but 5, if there's but one soul in that city, give them to him. Show him to me. Let me approach him. Let me go before him or her and tell them of the good news of Jesus Christ, of this salvation that has been offered freely to the entire world, and the entire world has rejected it. It's funny that the words of the prophets are so despised. We're told in the Bible not to despise the prophets. And yet we do. We still do. Why do we still kill the prophets? Why do we stone them? Why do we run them down and kill them? We're still doing it, folks. And by despising the words of the prophets, which were God's words that were given unto the prophets, am I making Ellen White equal to the Bible? No. But I'm just saying that if we despise her, then we despise God. It's a simple equation. God has sent prophets. How many prophets were well received in their day? Name one. They all were eventually killed. And look at John the Baptist. He was called the greatest of them all. He was despised. They beheaded him. Elijah, Jeremiah, Isaiah, Elisha. Well, Elijah went up in the chariot. There was a few prophets who lived to old age, but not many. But they were always despised. For many, many years they were despised. And then, of course, after so much time passes by, then their words are perverted. And then the devil figures, well, we don't need to have the people despise them anymore. I'll just twist their words so that their message has been adulterated. It's poisoned now because it only takes a tiny bit of error and mixed in with truth to be deadly. In fact, it's more deadly when it's done that way because the consumer sees that as something good to eat, and they perceive not that the poison has been placed in it. So when we see the prophet and we despise the sayings of the prophet, then we despise God, because God has given us these messages for these last days. Let me see. Okay. So folks, we've got about 9 minutes here. Been pretty quiet on the chat lines, but I'm assuming there's at least one person out there listening. But listen, this is our big opportunity to go out and to really live the gospel, to share with people the good news of Jesus Christ, to share the good news of salvation, but more importantly, to warn a lost and dying world of the pending conflicts. And people hate to hear this stuff. I always say that, actual prophecy is boring. The actual prophecies of God are not exciting at all, really, because when you tell people of the 1844 message and the 2300 days and how we're living in the antitypical day of atonement, where we need to afflict our souls and to search God for every last sin that we have in our lives, that's largely goes unheeded by people. It largely goes, people disregard that type of prophecy. They don't want that. They want something more fantastic. They want volcanoes erupting. They want Russia bombing America. They want China taking over. They want Israel and Palestine to be fighting and the sacrificing of the red heifers and all this stuff that you don't find in the Bible. It just blows my mind. But that's what Satan's done. He's taken the words of the ancient prophets and he's twisted them. He's absolutely just twisted them. And he's taken modern day prophets and he's made so many to distrust them. What about the other false prophets out there? And there's literally hundreds of them. Was there that much really written about them? No, you can go online and you can type in Ellen White, and there's for every good thing that's said about her, there's 9 things bad saying about her. And guess what? When you research those bad things, you'll come to appreciate what a great prophet she actually is, because none of those things are true. That's, and many people have done that. They've actually said, okay, well, I'm going to research these things and see if they're true. Many people don't research them. Many people just take it at face value that whatever they're watching must be true because it's on YouTube, because it's on, some social media platform. So it must be true. These people must know what they're talking about. And I hear some ridiculous things. I really do. I hear some ridiculous reasons why we should distrust the prophet. I mean, she more or less, when she spoke of these homes, I read a prophecy, somebody put it on Facebook earlier this week, about the homes burning, the stately mansions being consumed by flames, and the firemen could do nothing to put them out. I mean, this sounds like what's happening all over the place, not just in America, but in other parts too, but mainly America. I mean, this is where we're hearing these things, and mainly California. And why California? It could be because, to a large degree, it really, really looks like California has rejected God. I'm not passing judgment. I'm not God. I don't read the hearts of mankind. I just know that these things are there to wake people up. If they're not, then what else are they good for? What does God use these great disasters for other than to wake people up? Does he have no purpose? Does he have no insight on what is actually taking place? Is God's plans thwarted through the workings of the devil? Is the devil the only one doing anything out there? How little faith we have in God and his great plan for mankind. Why aren't we able to put a little bit more faith into God and his work and what he's really unfolding before us here? These are warnings, these are judgments, and they are an appeal to the people. This is a great appeal because time's almost up. And we would expect God to continue his appeals all up until the very, very last. So that when these wicked people, they stand before the judgment of God, and God has condemned them already, they've condemned themselves. It's not that God, well, you've been a bad boy. We've all been bad boys and girls. But God's grace has actually delivered us from our evilness. But these people chose not to accept the deliverance. And now they stand before judgment, facing their own sins. I don't have to face my sins if I give them to Christ. That seems unfair, don't it? Well, now you're getting it. Now you're getting the point. It is unfair. It's unfair that Jesus paid for my sins. That's totally unfair. I should have paid for them. You should pay for your sins too, but you don't have to. But these people are saying, well, I want to pay for my sins. Okay, well, God's a respecter of choices. And these people will indeed pay for their sins. And they'll stand there in judgment, and God will say, I tried over and over to reach you. You wouldn't. You would not. And so now the time of probation is closed. There is no going back. And these people wouldn't go back if you gave them 100 different tries. That's how firmly they're set. Oh, they're repentant of the impending doom that's upon them. They don't like the idea of being destroyed, but if given the chance, they would go and they would repeat their same mistakes over and over and over again. And so no matter what, that mind cannot be converted. And this is the mind, this is when God says that they will be as though they never were. They will be ashes under the soles of our feet. Speaking of the righteous, and I hope I'm amongst them. Now that we're not righteous because of our own, we're righteous because Jesus has made us righteous through his sacrifice. So when God looks down upon us, we're not the wretched soul that we are, but we're actually, he looks at us and he sees Jesus. This is the difference. This is the gospel. This is the message that needs to go to the whole world. And the fact that these fires are burning, the fact that the earthquakes are rumbling the earth, the fact that the volcanoes are erupting all over the place, the fact that destruction and war and famine and pestilence has ravaged this world from one end to the other. I mean, this is not a safe place to be. Do we really want to live on this earth forever with all of these problems cascading, getting worse and worse every year? The mind is incredible. It normalizes everything that comes across it. Every time we hear of some great disaster, we're scared for 1 minute, and then the fear goes away, and then it's normalized, and just another day at the office. And day after day, week after week, we continue to normalize these things. We continue to say in our minds, well, yeah, that's what happens when things are dry and the winds kick up. That's what happens. But that's not what happens. That's what happens when God passes judgments, and we're going to see worse and worse as time passes us by. Speaking of time, folks, we are out of time, and thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your prayers, guys. Those are really appreciated. And if you guys don't mind, hit that thumbs up and subscribe. And I appreciate every single one of you guys out there. So praise God.